Yes, it is.
Recording on. Good morning, our viewers. We are here once again for yet another episode of Strategically Speaking with Dr. Adityanjee on the platform of Council for Strategic Affairs. Good evening to our viewers in Bharat. Today we have a very special guest who does not need any introduction, Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar. He is a veteran of India's Foreign Service, having served for more than 34 years. He has been ambassador to three important countries, Kazakhstan, Latvia, and Sweden. Throughout his diplomatic service, he has served worldwide, has represented the country in major multinational fora, and after retirement from IFS, his zeal and commitment to India's cause has not diminished. He has been working with Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis as an executive council member. He is a distinguished fellow at Ananta Aspan Center. I'm going to welcome Ambassador Sajjanhar to our platform. Welcome, sir. We are indeed very pleased to have you here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adityanjee. Great pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
So our topic of conversation today with Ambassador Sajjanhar is the relevance and outcome of the G20 process. All of us know that there was a successful, very vibrant holding, organizing, and conclusion of the G20 summit in New Delhi in the last couple of days. So let's start with some issues about the beginning of the G20 summit. And my first question to you, Ambassador, is in this plethora of multiplicity of international organizations and groupings, what is the relevance or what we call raison d'etre of G20 in today's geo-economic and geopolitical scenario?
Well, thank you very much once again, Dr. Adityanjee, for inviting me to your show. It's always a pleasure to be in touch with you. The first question you have posed is indeed a very significant and a very important one. And if you permit me to say, I will suggest that out of all, you mentioned a plethora of multilateral organizations. I would say that out of all this plethora, possibly the G20 is the most preeminent multilateral body, particularly as far as economic and financial issues are concerned, as far as trade, development, and growth issues are concerned. And again, if you permit, I will very quickly go through the historical evolution of the G20. It started in the wake of the 1997 Asian financial crisis. You would recall, what was at that time known as the ASEAN Tigers, whether it is Thailand or it is Singapore or even Hong Kong and some of the others. They had huge currency depreciation problem. And then it was 20 countries, their central bank governors and finance ministers. They got together and they said, we need to meet every year to interact, to have discussions and try to find solutions for major global financial issues and problems. Now, after and this started in 1999. After that, in 2007, 2008, you would recall we had the subprime mortgage lending crisis in the United States. As a result of that, whether it is Lehman Brothers or many of the other major financial institutions, they had a lot of a problem. And in Europe, we had the sovereign debt crisis in 2009, 2010. So in the wake of this, in 2008, it was decided that this G20, which was meeting earlier at the level of the finance ministers and the central bank governors, that this needed to be brought up to the summit level. Because at the summit level, earlier we used to have only members of the developed countries, the G7, who used to meet. But now it was suggested that the G7 was not really effective. The center of gravity of global growth, production, etc., was shifting from the transatlantic side to Asia. So it was necessary to include some of these emerging economies also. And that was the time when in 2008, 2009, we set up this G20 at the summit level. And this proved to be very effective, in fact, in dealing with the financial challenges, the pressures, the stress on the financial system globally in 2008, 2009. Every year at that time, we used to have two meetings in a year. But after that, after the problem was sorted out, we've been having annual meetings. So today, what India is hosting the presidency. India is the head of the G20. This is the 18th meeting. And so, dealing with all the challenges that come in front of the world and how to promote development and growth, that is the main task. And you would find around the world there is no other body as competent and is as effective as this, because it represents 85% of the global GDP. It represents more than two-thirds of the world population, and it represents more than 75% of world trade. And the last point that I want to make here is that now we have decided also to add the African Union in this grouping. So G20 will become G21. So that will add another 1.5 billion people in terms of population, which is pretty significant, and also about $3 trillion as far as GDP is concerned. So it will further enhance the heft of G20.
Thank you, Ambassador Sajjanhar. Now, naysayers have been saying that Bharat should quit platforms like SCO and BRICS because they are not very relevant, only one sided. What is so important for a country like Bharat to be in the mechanism like G20? Why it is relevant? Why we should take the leadership, continue to participate, with full strength in this kind of international mechanism? What it brings to us?
As far as G20, the question is with
Yes,
respect to
yes,
G20 or
yes.
SCO and BRICS? Okay, G20.
In
As I,
contrast to SCO and BRICS, when people are saying that you should leave
yeah,
this.
yeah. Okay. No, because I am definitely of the view that India needs to stay in SCO, it needs to stay in BRICS, and definitely it needs to stay in the G20. Because as I have just explained, if there are problems in the world, then if there is, we are going to discuss them and create some synergetic solutions to these challenges, to the problems, then there is no other body. In fact, it is only the G20. I'll just give you an example also. And it's not only economic issues, it is other aspects also when we deal with it. You would recall that when COVID-19 struck in early 2020, at that time, China was chairing the UN Security Council in March of 2020, and it refused to take up the issue of COVID because it said it's not a peace and security matter. It's a health matter, and where UN Security Council doesn't deal with that. So there was no UN which was dealing with it. There was no international body out there to deal with it. And at that time, you would recall Saudi Arabia was the chair of the G20. Prime Minister Modi at that time spoke to MBS, Crown Prince MBS, and suggested that the G20 convene a meeting. And if my memory serves me correctly, it was convened on the 26th of March 2020. And then it kept itself engaged with this whole issue of the COVID-19 pandemic. If you look at the situation today, Dr. Adityanjee, what you see is that the world has been passing through very tumultuous times, very turbulent times. I just mentioned about the COVID-19 pandemic. See what havoc COVID-19 pandemic has wreaked on the world. whether it is health issues, whether it is people who have died because of the infection, the impact on the economies of different countries, the disruption in supply chains, the weaponization of supply chains by a country like China. And then after that, you have, and the whole world was affected. But the countries which were particularly affected were the developing countries. And then you see last year in February 2022, we have the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We have the aggression by Russia on Ukraine. And the result of that is a shortage of food, shortage of fertilizer, shortage of energy, uh, galloping inflation, huge debt. And all these are basically affecting the developing countries much more. So there has to be a body that has to get together and try to find solutions. And I'm very happy to say that, when we come to the outcomes of the G20 under India's presidency, that we have got some very good and significant outcomes and decisions as to how to deal with the aspects of whether it is climate change or the sustainable development goals, because they have been affected as a result of these crises. So definitely, and India is today, it is the fifth largest economy in the world. It is, yesterday, Ms. Gopinath, the deputy MD of IMF, said that by 2027 or 28, it will be the third largest economy in the world. The MD of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, she had said very recently that India is the only bright spot in this otherwise global economic environment, which is very gloomy. So India is an important country. It is the fastest growing major economy in the world. So it has certain responsibilities, it has a certain role to play, and it can contribute very significantly to the resolution of all these challenges and issues that come up in the world from time to time. So it is absolutely imperative for India as well as for the global community to stay very actively engaged with institutions like this.
There were a lot of apprehensions about lack of possible lack of consensus at the end of the summit because of the Bali experience, because of the experience of three ministerial level meetings that could not come out with a consensus statement. So, what changed finally that the G7 countries agreed to the final draft that did not single out Russia in Articles 7 to 14 of the joint statement that came? What changed? They
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. I think it's a very relevant question because right at the beginning of and for the last several months, you are very, very right. Number one, you mentioned that the Bali consensus had broken down for good. And Russia had said very, very clearly that it is not going to accept the language that it had accepted in Bali. And then the red lines had been really drawn by the different protagonists. When Mr. Rishi Sunak came here, or Sergei Lavrov came here, or representatives of the European Union, they said, we are going to seek very strong language condemning Russia, etc. So I think one of the reasons I believe is that India has emerged, as I've been talking, India has emerged as a partner of choice for all countries. India's policy is one of multi-alignment. India is not one given to exclusive relations with one or the other. So I think India is the only country, Dr. Adityanjee, which straddles across different barriers. The world is polarized, as all of us are aware today, between the North and the South, between developed and developing countries. The world is polarized between East and the West, that is Russia and China on one side, and the United States and West Europe and Japan and Australia on the other. I think India is about the only country which has the possibility of, enjoys a comfort level with all these countries. And I think all these countries really wanted that the Indian G20 presidency should be a success. And with I would say the contribution of G7, you mentioned G7, and the contribution of President Joe Biden, President Emmanuel Macron, I think they did not, if for the first time G20 had finished without an accepted document, it would have been an embarrassment. It would have been belittling India. And I think none of the countries really wanted that to happen. Also, I think it is all the rise of the global south, so to say, and of the emerging economies. And when whether it is Russia or China, because it was earlier mentioned that China could act to be a spoiler, and there were a large number of newspaper reports which were emerging as to what were the obstacles and what were the objections that the Chinese delegation was raising in a number of areas. So it was thought that, quite possibly China would not agree to just to make sure that India would not have a successful and it would not be able to go out in glory as far as the G20 presidency is concerned. But I think that when they saw that the global south, the emerging economies of India, Brazil, South Africa, Indonesia, Mexico, etc., they are determined to have a good result as far as this is concerned, not only on the, some sort of consensus formulation on the Russia-Ukraine conflict, but equally importantly on the substantive issues. I think every one of them came around. And in the end, I would say it was a victory for Team India. Team India worked very hard, and Team India was led by the very decisive, resolute, and visionary leadership of Prime Minister Modi. And he led from the front, and he was able to connect with all the global leaders also who were here. And he was able to pilot that very much in time. Normally, the consensus declarations, etc., are adopted at the end of the meetings, at the end of the summits. And here it was at the beginning of the second session of the summit on the first day of the deliberation. So I think that is quite remarkable.
Indeed, it is quite remarkable, and that brings to my next question. All of us know it is not a hidden secret. President Xi Jinping chose to stay away from this particular meeting, uh, and people have speculated what may have been the reasons. In your opinion, what were the possible reasons for Xi Jinping's absence, whether it was domestic economic crisis, fear of being sidelined in G20 process, being isolated, India-China border issues and the complicating situation, or more serious reasons like preparation for some military expedition across Taiwan Strait. What is going on in his mind?
It's very difficult to say what is going on in his mind because I think the Chinese mind can be quite inscrutable. In April 2020, the Chinese troops came on the line of actual control, 50,000, and they put in aircrafts and tanks and all. So far, there has been no explanation as to why that was done. We have been speculating, we have given 10 reasons. Even the External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, has said we till now we don't know for a fact as to what was the reason why China decided to tear up the MOUs, the confidence building measures, MOUs that we had signed in 1993, 1996, not to post these troops on our line of actual control. So it's very difficult to decipher what might have gone on in the minds of the Chinese leadership. But I think it could be some of all these that you have mentioned. I think he did not want, he thought that his absence would take some of the shine and the aura away from the G20 because Mr. Putin is not coming, Xi Jinping is not coming. So they would say that, okay, the significance, the relevance. He maybe did not wish to be a part of India's success. He did not wish to add to India's success. And, he might have thought that his absence would create even further problems in trying to get to some sort of consensus on the declaration. There could be, his health could be an issue because you would recall that when he was in Johannesburg, then on the first evening, all the leaders, they attended a business forum and addressed a business forum. He did not come for that. He came only for, sent his commerce minister. So he did not come for that. And, so health could be an issue. Then there have also been reports that Mr. Xi Jinping was reprimanded by his elders in one of the meetings that took place in terms of the direction the nation is taking, the sort of relations that exist now with the United States. There is, problem as far as the domestic economy is concerned, as you mentioned. There is youth unemployment of huge percentage. So, and there have been demonstrations, there have been protests, which is something quite unusual. The economy is not doing too well. And, people are saying, those who look at China very, very closely, they feel that the Chinese economic miracle is now a matter of the past. And whatever, people might be saying and companies might be saying that they are going for a China plus one initiative or, trying to not decouple, de-risk. But I think this has been felt that China is not in, the Chinese economy is not in a happy place, not in a good place. Now, I've not heard anything about what you mentioned about the attack on possible attack or incursion military operation on Taiwan. Although, President Joe Biden in Vietnam, he has said that the economic condition of China seems to be so bad that, the possibility of an attack on China in the near future appears to be rather remote. But, there are all these reasons, and there could be one or several of these reasons combined. But whatever it might be, I think his absence did not make any difference as far as the proceedings of the G20 are concerned. In fact, I had written an article in which I had said that, in fact, his absence could be a blessing in disguise as far as India is concerned, because if he had come, there would have been so much of, as far as the Prime Minister Modi is concerned, President Biden is concerned, there would have been that element of discomfort because, they are the sort of bonhomie and the warmth and the camaraderie and the cordiality that we saw between Prime Minister Modi and all the leaders who came to India. I mean, that would have been lacking, except maybe, Mr. Justin Trudeau, because I think that is a separate case. So, but with all the others, it was, but with the President Xi Jinping, it would have been, the personal vibes would have been different. And in that sense, it would have taken away from the warmth and the very sort of, message of hope and peace that India has sought to give through its presidency. And I think to a very significant extent, it has been able to give that message. So if Xi Jinping was here, there would have been that problem. He might have felt, somewhat isolated in this and felt uncomfortable also. So maybe all those reasons might have been there, but for the success of the G20, his absence, I think, to some extent contributed. to its success. Yeah.
Very well said, Ambassador Sajjanhar, and that brings me to my next question. If you look at the joint statement or communique, it's like 37 pages long, and there are four articles, article number 70 to 72 to 75, on issue of terrorism and counter-terrorism measures. And for the first time, terrorism is defined, and what counter-terrorism measures are required is also defined. Inclusion of this language, now to put it bluntly, is it a slap on face of two nations? One is our neighboring nation, Pakistan, and second, its all-weather ally, China. Looking at the performance of these two nations in, again, multiplicity of international platforms, the attitude and the way they have conducted on this issue, successful inclusion of such clear and precise language, is it a slap on the face of these two countries?
Well, yes, I think, let me put it this way. Well, what does India and some of the other countries, who are victims of terrorism and, money laundering and all the other, state-supported, sponsored terrorism, etc., that we need to keep the pressure up on these countries, those who are state sponsors of terrorism or who are, supporting them in some way or the other. We have seen in so many cases, whether it was, the case of Masood Azhar, 2009, we took him first to the UN Security Council 1267 committee for designation as an international terrorist. And China put a technical hold on that. And that continued for four times on four occasions. It continued to put this technical hold. It was only after countries like France and US, they said out of that we will ask this whole discussion to come out of the 1267 committee to the full UN Security Council and ask China to explain as to what are the reasons why it was putting this technical hold. It was only after such threat that China removed the technical hold. But still, it continues to put such vetoes or technical holds on the designation. So I think, it is good that this language has appeared in this document. But we also need to be clear that, G20 documents are not legally or judicially enforceable. They
Yes.
are only advisories. They
Yes.
are only sort of, suggestions to the different countries that this is the approach that they need to adopt. And what, my own experience has been in this case is that China will accept on paper many things, but its action will definitely not be in conformity with what it is. It doesn't walk the talk. And this is what, my experience has been, particularly in this area of terrorism and support to Pakistan that it gives, even as far as its own relations. It says that it is follows all the principles of the United Nations and Charter and peace and security. So, as far as platitudes are concerned, as far as high sounding words are concerned, China is very good at all that, but I don't see it following those. And so here also, I think it serves a purpose. But and definitely it means that all these countries, the other countries, have aligned, have got together, and they are calling out the perfidy of both Pakistan and China. But I will really sort of, not hold my breath that, the policies are going to change anytime soon. And we will need to keep the pressure in more ways than one, not only as far as such documents in multilateral or international fora are concerned, but as we have shown Pakistan on the line of control, that if there are such actions or activities by them, then they are going to get a befitting response. We showed that in Uri in September 2016. We showed that in Balakot against the Pulwama attack in February 2019. So after that, we have, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, but we have not had any such major attack because I think the message has gone down to Pakistan very well. So I think it is on multiple fronts that we need to deal with the issue of terrorism.
I perfectly agree with you, Ambassador Sajjanhar, about China's, talk and walk not being in consonance. There's a very simple proverb: a leopard never changes its spots. And
Indeed,
that is
indeed.
what applies to China. But let's move on to other issues about the outcome. And you already mentioned about inclusion of AU as a permanent member of G20 process. In the long run, this single step has helped India's leadership to be appreciated by the rest of the world. Will this be a hallmark of India in terms of inclusivity, diversity, and leadership of the global south? This single step, I think, to my mind, it appears to be a milestone for this particular G20 summit. What are your views on this?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. I think it is a historic achievement getting the membership of African Union. I don't know whether you are aware or your viewers and listeners are aware of the incident that took place in Bali on the
Bali.
last day. In Bali
Please
on the last
clarify.
day in November 22, when I think the then president of the African Union, he walked up to President Joko Widodo, who was handing over the baton to Prime Minister Modi, and he said, we are 54 countries and we are still not represented. This is situation is incongruous. And what Dr. Jaishankar has mentioned is that Prime Minister Modi looked him in the eye and he's told him that African Union will become a member during my presidency, and that this is Modi's guarantee. So, and he told that to him in Hindi. And he couldn't understand what was said in Hindi, but he said, I understood that he's giving me a guarantee that African Union will be a member. So I think this issue was taken up very seriously by Prime Minister Modi. He wrote to all the leaders. I think whenever he spoke with them, he spoke and encouraged that this should be done. When he was, I was listening to an interview of the South African foreign minister, and she said that when Prime Minister Modi was in Johannesburg for the BRICS summit, he spoke to all the leaders and said that they should come on board as far as the membership of the African Union is concerned. So I think he took it up very seriously and he took it up very personally and reached out to the leaders. And I think that did play a very important role. There was some indication, again, that China might put some sort of a spoke in the wheel because it might not wish that India should get the credit for bringing in AU, like the sort of what we are talking about in the case of terrorism, some sort of a technical hold. We need to study it a little more. We need a little more time to discuss. It's a great idea, but how will it work? Meaning there are so many ploys that you can use in diplomacy. But then I think it was the manner, the seamless, flawless manner in which Prime Minister Modi piloted this whole thing that he didn't really give an opportunity to anyone to object to this. This was done at the beginning of the first session. And so, as you said very correctly, and I fully agree with you that this has a huge potential because, as I mentioned, it is 54 countries, more than 1 billion population, and which means it's the population is as large as India, so about 17% of the global population, and and this population is going to grow. India's population is going to stabilize by about 2050, 2080. China's population is going to decline. All developed countries, their population is going to decline. The only region which is going to contribute to providing workforce and manpower to the world, and also to provide consumers to the world, it is going to be Africa. So I think we have to be mindful of that. We are not to speak about, think only about today, tomorrow, but also day after, because Africa really represents the future of the day after, and it needs all the support and all the help. India, of course, has been, right from the time of when India became independent and its movement against apartheid and so on and so forth. And even before that, when Mahatma Gandhi went there in 1893. So I think India has been very actively, deeply engaged with Africa, and this is a result of that we want to see the continent of Africa, and which is represented by the African Union, to get its rightful place in the Committee of Nations.
So one of the proposals in the G20 was, about India, West Asia, and European trade and connectivity corridor. In your opinion, how significant this proposal would be for India's future economic growth and strategic concerns going through that region?
I think it's a game changer. I think it's a watershed initiative that has been announced. Uh, I'm not certain whether it is a part of the G20 document. I think
It's
the
not part of the
decision,
document.
yeah, it was on the sidelines.
Yeah.
There was the meeting, Prime Minister Modi chaired it, President Joe Biden, Mohammed bin Salman, Emmanuel Macron, Ursula von der Leyen, Mohammed bin Zayed, all of them were there, and all of them have contributed. And I heard today an interview by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, and he's also very strongly supported it. So I think this is phenomenal. This is there is so much of work that has been done and is being done. So it will, reduce the time, reduce the cost, reduce the, make it more efficient, make it more, as far as climate change is concerned. Because if it is going spending less time, that means it is going to be more climate friendly when this goes. As it is, our relations with the Gulf Cooperation Council, we have about 8-9 million of our people who are working there. More than 60% of the remittances of about $100 billion that we get every year are coming from the Gulf. So it's a very significant part, and it's a very of our outreach. It's a very significant partner. And then going from there to Europe, from through Israel to Greece and to Europe, I think that will be huge. It will give a very strong impetus to our engagement, both with West Asia as well as with Europe. And I think, as Prime Minister Modi was saying in reference to in one of his addresses, he said connectivity not only promotes trade, not only promotes investment, not only promotes production and productivity, but it also promotes trust. And I think that is very important. And the second aspect that I would like to mention here is that, in my view, it should not be looked only as a trade connectivity project. I think it has geostrategic significance, geostrategic connotations, because people are saying, maybe it is a challenger to the Belt and Road Initiative of China, and that is under there have been a lot of question marks, that there is debt trap, that the sort of funding investments that China engages in. Then, in terms of the benefits that it provides to the host country, we've seen it in Sri Lanka. As far as the Hambantota port is concerned, it is hardly, is able to generate any business. It is even as far as the construction of these BRI projects are concerned, there is no local talent, no local labor, no local machinery. These are all people who come from China. We've seen that in Pakistan. We've seen that in so many other places. We've seen that all these projects are non-transparent as far as economically they are not viable, they are not sustainable. As far as climate is concerned, they are ecologically not sustainable also. So there are lots of problems with the BRI. And so if this is able to come, I think this initiative and we are able to take it to other places, I think that will be a huge advantage and benefit to a number of developing countries. And what we've been seeing also, China signing a $400 billion deal with Iran, China getting into the space, occupying the space there by mending relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So there was this feeling that, since the United States has become self-sufficient as far as energy is concerned, so it has lost interest. But I think the involvement of the United States in this project is very, very welcome because it, very strongly demonstrates that the United States is not going anywhere and it is committed to stay in this region and to provide, to play its role of ensuring security, stability, and peace in the region.
Thank you, Ambassador Sajjanhar. Looking at the future, if you read the Article 76 of the Joint Communique, besides welcoming AU as a permanent member, it also has a very specific language, and I'm going to quote that language. We are supportive of further discussing the deepening of cooperation between G20 and other regional partners. Now, where would this lead to? Will this lead to, having other putative candidates for inclusion like ASEAN, Organization of American States, OECD countries, or Eurasian Union that is being championed by Russia? Where will this process of deepening lead to? Will it lead to an ineffectual and ungovernable platform for G20 if we, take this rhetoric to the extreme? Any comments?
Yeah, I think you've raised the question and I think you've very effectively responded to it also. Because the advantage of G20 is that it is large enough to represent a very significant majority of the global economy. And it is small enough for discussions to take place and decisions to be taken. So if it brings, here we are getting, we have European Union as a member, and European Union is a significant member. We have now, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen was there, President of the European Council, Charles Michel was there. So both of the representatives were there. And so an African Union, I think the case of the African Union is beyond reproach because I think so many countries, and they are the ones who are really affected the most by the decisions of the G20. Because the whatever G20 decides, they are the ones that will have to bear the impact. I will not say bear the brunt of it, bear the impact, because obviously G20 will be deciding on cases in a manner that they benefit all the developing countries. So I think it is necessary for them to be at the negotiating table, like Prime Minister Modi had done that, organized the Voice of the Global South summit on 12th and 13th of January, so that he could get the views and concerns and anxieties of these developing countries and get them reflected in the G20 document. And I think he has been able to do that. So he was able to consult over those 2 days about 125 countries. So taking it forward, I think it'll have to be on a case-by-case basis. It cannot be that, because as far as Eurasian Economic Union is concerned, you have Russia, you have Kazakhstan, you have Kyrgyzstan, you have Tajikistan, you have Belarus and Armenia. These are the 4 5 countries. ASEAN, you have about 10 of them. I think there is the possibility, like India had done, India had invited about 9 guest members who participated in all the meetings, who were also there at the summit. So I think that is an approach that could be adopted. But otherwise, if each small grouping starts promoting its own case, starts pressing its own case for a membership of the G20, I think it make it to be too unwieldy. So as I said, I think they will decide that each case has to be on a case-to-case basis. After all, if you want to have, let us say, Mercosur. Now, in Mercosur, you already have Brazil and Argentina. Both of them are individual members. The only ones you will add is Uruguay, Chile, and maybe one more country. So I think it has to be a big grouping, a representative grouping, etc. But maybe this was a sort of a compromise language that was put in, that, okay, we are getting and we are not closing the door on other regional organizations. It will depend upon their relevance and their significance.
So usually one does not indulge in binary language, but I'm going to put you on a hot
Okay.
seat.
Mhm.
Who are the winners and who are the losers of this G20 summit, according to you?
Okay. Interesting question. I would say that first of all, G20 itself is the winner because we have been able to get a clean text, and we were able to get a clean text on the first day itself without any of the wranglings. I have negotiated in very many multilateral fora. And in many of those, and I can speak about the trade negotiations, whether it was at the WTO or it was, the India ASEAN FTA or India EU FTA. I've negotiated on all this. Now, what happens normally in those cases is that, let's say, a meeting takes place from Monday to Friday, and Friday it's supposed to end at 5 o'clock. That's the final day. Then the negotiations continue till 12 midnight, and you say we are stopping the clock, and you continue to negotiate. You meet on Sunday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And after all these many days, you come to some sort of a conclusion. And then you say, okay, and you sign it as of Friday. Now, we didn't have to stop the clock here. We, in fact, came more than a day in advance. And that is phenomenal. So I think this speaks of the spirit of accommodation, a spirit of compromise for the common good, for the global good, that the G20 was able to see, that the G20 participants were able to see. Having negotiated for so long, what I have always maintained is that a good final document is one which leaves all the parties equally dissatisfied and equally unhappy. Because if it keeps one set of parties happy, another set dissatisfied, it will not fly. If all of them have not got what they really came out, what was their final position, they've had to compromise, they have to give in. Then only there is a possibility of that agreement flying. And I think here, and particularly I can speak about the Russia-Ukraine conflict paragraphs, because all the other paragraphs are more technical in nature. And so, the give and take there is possible. So here I think first it would be G20, which has won. These equally at the same level would be Team India, led by Prime Minister Modi. I think that has won. And yes, these are the big winners. As far as losers, I don't think there are any losers. I think, as I said, G20 has won. So the world has won, that we got we got the African Union inside. We made very many substantive decisions, which, if implemented, will go a long way in resolving many of the issues and dealing with several of the crises that the world is afflicted by.
That was a very diplomatic answer, Ambassador Sajjanhar. There are always losers in the process, but I can understand why you would not say that. But let's move on to the next question. After successful conclusion of the G20 summit and looking at the optics and successful celebration of Bharat's diplomacy, if you were close advisor of Xi Jinping, what would be your recommendation to him? Should he have attended the meeting in person and participate in the deliberations, or look for other ways to sideline and contain India's diplomatic triumph? If you were advisor to Xi Jinping.
Okay, so if I were advisor to Xi Jinping, I would say that you should have attended, you should have been there, because that is what statesmen do. Statesmen don't go only to places where they are the boss, where they can act like an emperor, and that they are the most preeminent personality in that. So if I was advising, I would have said, even if the comfort levels are not so good, I think you have to show up and you have to contribute in whatever manner. After all, G20 is far too important an organization to stay absent from there. And if you are absent, then you shouldn't only be looking at your personal image as to how you would feel and how you might not get all the importance that you otherwise are used to getting in BRICS and SCO and other such places. But you are representing your country. You have to take the interest of your country forward, and you should not be conflating the interest of the country with that of yourself. So that is definitely, I would have told him that. Now, I would also tell him, I would also advise him that it is futile to try and sideline India, because China today is a big economy. It is a big power. It is a major power. It's about 14, 15, $16 trillion. India is rising very rapidly. India will go forward. And, if it continues to grow at the rate of 8%, 9%, 10%, then within a very few years, the difference between the two economies will be significantly reduced. It would be marginal. So it would be in the interest of China itself to have good positive relations, not be, give up its expansionist policies. The fact that it is claiming these 93,000 square kilometers of Indian territory in Arunachal Pradesh. And, the messaging from India would have been very, very clear that if China thought in April 2020 that India is far too occupied in dealing with COVID-19, you would recall that COVID had been inflicted upon the whole world in early 2020, and that India would not be able to respond effectively to this maneuvers of the Chinese army, Chinese forces. Then they should have been disabused of that particular thinking, because India went there very strongly and stuck there. And over the last 3, 4 years now, 3 winters, we have continued to stay there, and we will continue. So we are not going to, India is not going to compromise with its sovereignty and territorial integrity. So I would advise Mr. Xi Jinping is that you should try to make up with India, because the benefits and the advantages to China in terms of its economic growth, in terms of its economic prosperity, in terms of its stability, in terms of its security, in terms of its global position in the world, it will be much greater if it is on, if it has good relations with India, rather than it is, has such tense relations, because it is, so to say, on a war path with so many of its neighbors. of course, the Russia-China linkage, I think, is a tactical engagement, tactical partnership we can see, meaning starting much more significantly from 2014 when sanctions were placed on Russia after it annexed Crimea. But otherwise, whether it is South China Sea, Japan, South Korea, the ASEAN states, most of them, it came out with its map, and we saw how so many 8 countries protested: Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, all of them, India, Nepal, Russia, all of them. So I would advise it that it should have a you should have a rethink on its expansionist policies and try to mend relations with its neighbors, particularly with India.
So Bharat's achievement in conducting successfully the 18th G20 summit meeting also resulted in an unfortunate outcome. And that unfortunate outcome is killing of G20. G20 is no more. Welcome G21. In your opinion, how much substantially and deeper G21 process be different from G20 G21 process will be different from G20 mechanism?
Okay, as far as the nomenclature is concerned, I am not very certain whether G20 is going to transform into G21. Substantively, it will, increase, it will transform to G21. But in terms of the nomenclature, I have heard some views that it might continue to stay G20. I have heard both accounts. So we'll have to wait as far as the nomenclature is concerned, whether it gets changed to G21 or it continues to be G20 with 21 members. You would recall we've had this G77 group of 77, although the membership goes up to 125, but the nomenclature of that still continues to be G77. So maybe something on the same lines. Now, as I said right at the beginning, out of 8 billion total population, now it represents 67% of the total population G20. Now it will be adding about 1.3 billion people more. So it'll become, I think, about, I haven't done the calculation as yet, but it would be very close to about 75%. So the heft, the weight, the gravitas, the significance of G20 will be more, even in terms of the total GDP. I think today it represents about 85% of the global GDP. Now it will be representing 90%. So in that sense, I think it will be able to speak in an even more authoritative voice because it is representing the voice of all these countries. That having been said, what I think is, the real change, because this is in terms of numbers, but the real change, in my view, that is going to take place is that the interests of the developing countries or the global south are going to occupy center stage as far as deliberations and decisions of G20 are concerned. You have, Professor Adityanjee, you have seen, you have read the declaration. And the declaration is so global south centric, even now. So I think going forward, and now we are going to have, it is the emerging market economies. The next presidency is going to be Brazil. After that, it's going to be South Africa. So we have a string of 4 presidencies which are of emerging market economies, with Indonesia, India, Brazil, South Africa. So I think the concerns and the interests of developing countries would be center stage, and that I think would definitely reflect a change both in the issues that are discussed and the final results that we come up with.
So despite having an internationalist outlook, one is always, guarding self-interest. In your opinion, what are going to be the regional implications of this successful conclusion of G20 meeting, dividends for Bharat in terms of geoeconomics and geopolitical concerns in the Indian subcontinent?
Yeah, I think, as I said right at the beginning, also the stature, the position, the standing of India will definitely grow, will definitely rise. But of course, this is one step, a major step, a significant step in our path to occupying our rightful place in the Committee of Nations. We will need to continue to work. The challenges in front of Bharat are still enormous. And although we might feel satisfied that we are, the fastest growing major economy in the world, sorry, that, in the last quarter, we had a GDP growth of 7.8%. We are now, more than 3.5, $3.7 trillion economy, et cetera, et cetera. And we are going to be $10 trillion very soon or something, in the coming year, decades, or whatever. We might take, pride and satisfaction, but still, we cannot take our eye off the ball. We have to continue to work. We have to continue to, particularly as far as the economy is concerned, as far as technology is concerned, as far as innovation is concerned, because still our per capita GDP is rather modest. And we have to improve the living conditions, standards, living of our people. So I think that has to increase per capita in terms of the impact of the climate change, in terms of the condition of safety, security of women folk in our country, the malnutrition, the poverty levels, the inequalities. So these are challenges. And I'm sure you see, I am convinced that the Indian leadership is very cognizant of that. It realizes that these are challenges and we need to continue to fight these challenges and overcome these challenges. That is why, whether it is the digital public infrastructure, whether it is, providing food, free food to 800 million people after the COVID struck, in terms of the Ujjwala Yojana, that is the gas stoves, providing gas stoves and free gas cylinders for some time, the Awas Yojana, providing housing to people. So I think in the economic and social spheres, the recognition is very much there that we need to continue to progress at a fast pace. So that will continue to be done, but I think we will be able to, as far as our neighborhood is concerned, you spoke about regional, what will be the regional impact. So India's relations with our neighboring countries, the government had launched the Neighborhood First policy in 2014. And if I were to look at our relations with most of our neighbors, barring Pakistan and China, and those are sui generis cases, so to say. If I were to look at relations with all these countries, I think they are much better today than they have been for a long, long time. And the success of G20 and India's increasing economic clout, I think that will further strengthen and give vitality to our relationship, to our partnership and engagement in the region.
As a diplomat with vast 34 years of experience in IFS, I am pretty sure there have been moments when you might have heard that India is part of the problem. Actually, at this juncture, India is no longer part of the problem. India is the solution, not part of the solution. India is the solution. And when you say India's soft power, India's smart power in full display internationally, how does that make you feel as an individual and as a diplomat and as a proud Indian ambassador?
It makes me feel very good. And I think it's not only as a diplomat that it makes me feel good, it makes me feel good as an Indian citizen. And I'm sure all the Indians who have seen the journey of India from over the last let me put it this way, 20, 30 years. I remember when I had joined the service, then, the only story that we used to read was the hyphenation between India and Pakistan. You know, any world leader who used to come to India, he had to go to Pakistan and vice versa. Luckily, that was changed in 2000, March 2000, when President Bill Clinton came here for the first time. He visited India for about 5, 6 days, and he went to Pakistan at the airport. He stayed at the airport just for a couple of hours to address the people of Pakistan on television. So that change has been taking place for some time, and I've been noticing earlier it used to be the India Pakistan hyphenation, now it is the India China hyphenation on the economic front. But of course, India has much greater strengths. You know, India is a benign power, India is a well liked power. China is, in that sense, a threatening sort of power as such. So India has been growing, and the last 9, 10 years have been particularly remarkable in that, in the way India's, the way it conducts its foreign policy, the way it conducts its foreign relations, whether it's with its neighbors or strategic partners, the policy of multi-alignment that it is following. I think that has brought India to a whole new place. So India is today the partner of choice. As you said, it is not, and I fully agree with you, it's not a part of the problem, it is the solution. And you look at any of the issues, whether it is matters of peace, whether it is matter of security, or it is matter of climate change. I think India launched the International Solar Alliance in 2015 at the Paris COP21 meeting. We launched the Biofuels Alliance yesterday, which will also help in a very big way as far as climate change issues are concerned. We've taken very ambitious targets of 500 gigawatts of renewable by 2030, of getting 40% of our electricity through renewables by 2030, and having a zero carbon neutral economy by 2070. So very, very ambitious targets we have taken. So I think we have become leaders in all these areas. When there was food shortage around the world, India was provided during the COVID period. India was, and after the Russia-Ukraine conflict, India has been providing food to a large number of countries. India became the provider of vaccines. Not only were we able to make vaccines ourselves, but when India started its own vaccination process on the 16th of January 2021, the first consignment of our vaccines to go out as help gratis in our neighborhood was on the 20th of January, within 4 days. And you would have seen that developed countries were sitting on their supplies of vaccines and would not share with other countries. While India was very generous, whether it was Bangladesh, we sent 2 million vaccine doses, Nepal also 1 million doses, Bhutan, all countries. More than 300 million doses of vaccine were sent, most of them on gratis basis, to 100 countries, to more than 100 countries. So I think the message that India seeks to give to the world is that when India grows, it is for the benefit of the world. So the world also benefits when India grows, and definitely we have seen that as far as our own neighborhood is concerned, as far as our own region is concerned. So yes, I think it gives a very happy feeling, but as I said, there is still more to do.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Sajjanhar. It was absolute pleasure talking to you, having this conversation. We are very thankful to you for this, and we hope that you will continue to grace our platform with your lucid, incisive thinking about diplomatic and international issues. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Adityanjee. Let me say it's been a great pleasure for me also to interact with you. You have lobbed many curveballs at me, but I've tried to respond to them to the, in as honest a manner as possible. So I have enjoyed our conversation and I look forward to more of our conversations and our engagement on other platforms. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.